Thank you, everyone. Hello and welcome to Badger Talks Live, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond. My name is CJ Zabat, and I am from Bartlett, Illinois. As a recent graduate of the University of Wisconsin, I had the honor of performing in the University of Wisconsin Marching Band for 4 years under legendary band director Mike Leckrone. First as a member of the percussion section, and later as drum major for Mike's final year with the band, which I believe we had a picture of that was able to be shared. And so I am currently traveling the country with the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, but I continue to proudly display my badge of pride whenever duty calls, as shown by today's crew neck, and I think we have another picture of that as well. So today, Mike will be sharing funny stories and thoughtful reflections on his 50-year history leading the University of Wisconsin Band. He will discuss the development of iconic traditions and share those experiences that he shared and helped shape for hundreds and also even thousands of band students during his tenure, and of course, countless fans in Camp Randall Stadium. Director of the UW Marching Band and Director of Bands in the UW-Madison School of Music from 1969 to 2019, an inspiring 50 years, Mike established numerous traditions, including the fifth quarter, the Bud Song, and the Badger Band's signature Stop at the Top marching style. His many accolades include the Lifetime Achievement from the Wisconsin Foundation for School of Music, the Spencer Tracy Award for Distinction in the Performing Arts from the Wisconsin Historical Society, excuse me, the Michael St. John Lifetime Achievement Award from the Madison Area Music Association, the Edwin Franco Goldman Lifetime Achievement Award from the American School Band Directors Association, and the Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia Lifetime Achievement Award. After his presentation, Mike will be taking your questions, so feel free to post them into the chat. Everyone, please join me in welcoming the one and only Mike Leckrone.
Well, it's nice to be here. I haven't seen CJ for quite some time. I would probably suggest you get a haircut, but he's not in the band anymore, so we don't have to worry about that. I just wanted to put things in perspective as to what my role at the university was. I came to university in 1969. If you don't understand the perspective there, Neil Armstrong had just landed on the moon. Woodstock was something everybody was talking about as this big musical event that everybody had heard about. Aquarius was the #1 song in the country. Tiny Tim had just made an appearance on the Johnny Carson show singing Tulip song. If you don't know any of those things, you probably won't relate to anything I'm going to talk about today because those are all before your time. But when I came in 1969, it was a very different time in the university's history and in my own history. I was the third band director in 3 years. That meant that there was no continuity for what I had done or what had been done. There was a legendary man named Ray Dvorak who had preceded me, and he had built some of the great traditions that the band has. And then that was followed by an interim band director who didn't feel that he wanted to make any changes. And then I came in. And so I lost a couple of classes of people who might have been able to help build the band. My first band was very small, 96. I mean, I've only jokingly said it was a great deal of truth to it. If you knew which end to blow in, you were in that band because that was a tough time to recruit people. It wasn't part of the culture. The whole idea of marching around, the whole idea of this sort of regimented behavior was not a part of the culture of the band or of people at the university at that time. We all know about the riots and so forth that was happening prior to that and after that happened, and it was a very big problem. The other problem was a football game. Football team wasn't very good. We had not won in, I think it was 2 years. There were 2 years where the football team had not won a game. So you could see morale was at kind of a low ebb. And when I came in, I understood all that. But there were a couple of things that made it very much fun for me to take over the job. First place, it was a great challenge. I considered it a challenge because I was told at the very beginning that anything I wanted to do, I could try. There was a man at the time who was the athletic director named Elroy Hirsch, great guy. I mean, he gave me so much encouragement to do what I later did. But Elroy said, Mike, you can do anything with the band you want to do. No limits, except just don't spend any money. And I thought he was joking at first, but he was being very honest with me. We had no budget whatsoever, but the doors were wide open, and I saw the chance to maybe take the band at another level that they hadn't gone before. But it was a real working problem. The band wasn't used to the kind of, because of that interim, they weren't used to the kind of intensity that I was more or less expecting. And so I was kind of a culture shock to them. I kid about it, but there was a degree of truth to this also. There were a number of people who were taking a lottery bets on how long I would last because they thought I was a little bit too intense at the time. But I really felt like if the band was going to get better, they had to try to achieve something. And one of the first things I did was to try to find a few things that the band could do as well as any other band in the country. And I've told this many times in clinics across the country. One of the very first things I did was say, well, let's get a good horns up. Now, CJ can relate to that. Horns up is a pretty basic move. You take the horns out, you bring it up, you start to play. But getting that horns up is something that you put a little emphasis on. You can make it very crisp. You can make it very military-like, or it can just become a matter of fact thing. So I said, we're going to have the best horns up in the country. And I added a few things. We worked on it every day. And I can remember some of the band members again saying, yeah, we marched against the Ohio State band, and they may have marched better than we did. And we marched against the Michigan band. They may have played better than we did, but we got the greatest horns up anybody's ever seen. And that gave them that sense of pride that I was trying to build on so that we could take the next step, which is to work on the marching. The marching style at that time with the band was was almost a 6-5. It's what we would call a walking step. In today's language, it was a glide step, is what the term became a little bit later. So there was a smoothness to it, but in the Big Ten, everybody was doing a high step. Fact is, a lot of band directors around the country called it the Big Ten style. You bring the foot up and you point the toe down a little bit, and you take a 22.5-inch step. CJ was with me many times when we talked about making sure the step was exactly 22.5 inches in length so that you can go 8 steps every 5 yards. In doing that, I watched the step, and I watched it many times and thought, well, this is a okay step, but it hasn't the energy, particularly when you view it from, say, 30, 40 rows up in Camp Randall Stadium, and you view it, you don't see that intensity. You don't see that sense of drive and enthusiasm that I wanted to get out of the band. So I said, well, let's modify it a little bit. So we took a few basic steps that I'd seen around the country. There was a step that the Michigan band used called a chop step. They used to call it a chop step. And it was a very choppy kind of looking step. And they only did it for a few minutes out of every show, but it was kind of an effective step. The difference between the chop step and what I was wanting to do is the chop step, they brought the thigh up so it was parallel to the ground. And that was it didn't enable them to do it for very long periods of time. The Ohio State band had a very nice toe point that I liked. So I started to combine different styles that I had seen, and I came up with a thing that it had kind of a nice sound to it. We started calling it Stop at the Top. In our marching style at the time, 2 things I was trying to establish. One is you bring the leg up, but you don't bring it up so high that it tries to be parallel to the ground. You bring it at a 45-degree angle, gives you more uniformity. And then the other thing that I made very certain was that when they marched, they always had a foot in contact with the ground. They always had that foot, that toe pointed down, but when you were marching, there was never a time when both feet were in the air. That was particularly important when we got to the tradition that we later called the run-on. But the marching style was the thing that I worked on, and it was one of the hardest things I think that I had to teach, but it was one of the things that I insisted on. And people in the band kept saying, well, this is difficult, what you want us to do, the intensity that I'm asking for. They said, this is hard to do. And it's when I started coming up with slogans, some of which my grandfather had taught me, but some of them just sort of happened naturally. I started saying, well, if it was easy, anybody could do it. And anybody who's ever been in the band has heard me say that dozens and dozens of times, because that's a part of the philosophy that I tried to get across to the students. It was easy, anybody could do it. What I'm asking them to do is not easy, it's not hard. And what you see the kids doing out on the field is not an easy thing. So we developed that. The run-on thing was a tradition. The band, before I came, literally ran on the field. I mean, they ran. And sometimes they got in each other's way. And there were many times when there was almost a domino effect where they were pushing and shoving at each other to get out of the way. So I wanted to calm it down. And so I came up with it's the traditional entrance that you're still seeing today. I said, well, let's make it more dramatic. Let's make there a sense of continuity to what's going on. So we brought out the tuba players, and we brought them out, as they like to call it, cranking the horns. So there was a lot of extra flash. The next step, I brought out the percussions without playing, because it was very important that they not start playing until everything was established. And then once percussion was in place, we brought the band out four abreast. They're still using, I'm delighted to say, they're still using the same exact entrance that I taught back in '69 to bring the band on the field. We did it a much sloppier in those days than we did now. And the idea of the foot being in contact with the ground was always something that I had to work on right up to my very last year. I was still complaining about it. That first year was very memorable for a lot of reasons. Being your first year and getting to know the kids was very important. But I think more important was we were finally thinking that the football team was coming around, that we were going to break that losing streak. And I remember, again, we had a lot of campus unrest. Elroy Hirsch at the time said, Mike, when we win that game, he said, the town is going to go crazy. And he said, you're going to want to have a parade permit to parade down State Street. So I went to the city hall and I got a parade permit so that for that first game against Oklahoma, we could be ready. And I'll be darned. First game we got beat 48-21, which sort of made the parade permit not worthwhile. But the next week we're supposed to play UCLA, and they didn't have as good a record. So we said, well, you better get another parade permit. So I got another parade permit. UCL beat us 34-23, I think it was. The next week we played Syracuse. Well, that's an easy win, I thought. We're going to finally break the streak. So I got another parade permit. They beat us, I think it was 42-7. So that parade permit, so finally I gave up on the parade permits. And then we got Iowa. Thank goodness for Iowa, because they came in and they were expected to beat us, but we won that game. The first game that Wisconsin had won in Camp Rand or any place for 2 years, and the stadium went absolutely berserk. I've never seen anything like it. The kids in the stands were shouting, Rose Bowl, because in those days that was the only bowl. There weren't all the multiplicity of bowl games that you see now. The people in the stands started shouting, and I thought, boy, this is great. My first year, and I got to shout at the Rose Bowl. Sure enough, 25 years later, I got there. But that was the excitement that generated was amazing, and it gave me and the band members a lot of impetus to take that next step. there were a lot of things that I tried to develop in the show, and we tried to make the show a lot more friendly to the audience. And by that, I mean, I played to the audience as much as I possibly could. Ray Dvorak, the great traditions that he had, they were more in a strictly military type tradition. And I tried to bring a little bit more of what I called show business to what the band was doing. And we did a lot of showy, crazy things. I remember the first time I told the band, and this was my first year, I said, well, we're going to do a dance step. In this next show, the next thing, we're going to do a dance step. And I got the members of the band to say, no, 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 we don't do dance steps. This is a Wisconsin band. We have this great military tradition behind us. We're not going to do any dancing. He said, that's for the dancing girls. That's for the cheerleaders and so forth. I still wanted to do those movements. So I started calling them podiatrical rhythmic motions. And the band bought that. They bought it. Whatever I was calling it, it was no longer a dance step, but it was something they were using their feet to do. And we did a lot of those kind of steps very early on. And it became, again, sort of a signature that became a part of what I was trying to get them to do. As I went through the years, the uniform bothered me. Ray had fashioned the first uniforms against the Marine band. He told me many times that the Marine band was one of his idol for what he wanted a band to look like. And they did in the early days. The uniform that I inherited was sort of a composite of a lot of things. It was the first coat that the Wisconsin band had that was red, but it was much more military looking. Had a long jacket and buttons across the front. It had a reversible shield. And I'll tell you very honest, I didn't like it because I didn't think it looked very fanciful. So right away I started about designing new uniforms. Didn't have money to buy new uniforms, but I started designing them of something that I wanted to see take place. Elroy again introduced me to a man named Bob Rennebaum, who was head of the UW Foundation at the time. And he said, if you need the uniforms, he said, we'll start a drive. And he said, get them designed and we'll see if we can't come up with the funds to make it happen. Well, he did. And I came up with a design that basically what you see in the band today. I wanted something that had a short waisted coat in front so that would emphasize the legs. I wanted a reversible front to back red to white look so that you get that flash as people turned. I wanted a hat that had a little more bling on it than the hats we had before. And I wanted the band to take on a more of a, I guess you'd say, modern age, futuristic kind of look. So I designed a jacket that had the shoulders were much wider than the people who were going to wear the shoulders. So you had that sort of a triangle look from the shoulders down. And it sort of had a sort of a space look about it, which I liked. And so those were all things that I brought to the band. And as soon as I started doing that, whether people heard it or not, they started thinking the band was immensely different. I think they were seeing with their eyes more than, or seeing with their ears more than their eyes. But nonetheless, it was a great step for us to do. The first couple of years, I just felt like we progressed. The great thing about the first 2 or 3 years is the band kept getting bigger. We grew by about 20 people the second year. By the third year, we were up to about 130 people in the band. And so that showed the progress that I was trying to make. That felt very good. We started to do a lot of things that were not just the marching band. One of the things I was charged with back in 1969 was to come up with, I was asked to come up with a band that would play for basketball games, purely basketball games. There was no, what people like to call a pep band at that particular time. It was just, the band would just kind of show up at a ball game. And I know the directors from the time told me they would go into the practice rooms or into the various places, and if they said, "Can you come to the game tonight and play for us?" Well, I was charged with Elroy and Bob Reynolds to come up with a basketball band. I never liked the term pep band. I always thought it had kind of a low life sound to it. So I started calling it the Varsity Band for a couple of reasons. We played for the varsity basketball team. And of course, varsity, one of the great traditions of University of Wisconsin, which is unsurpassed anywhere. And I say that without any thought of contradictions. Varsity, when you see it and hear it, is unlike anything that I've ever seen up till now. But anyhow, we started calling it the Varsity Band, and we started showing up for basketball games. And some basketball boots just bought us some red and white striped jackets, which we still have a few of them around. And those it gave the band an identity. But the thing that really made the difference was in 1973, after Bob Johnson finally convinced me to start playing for some hockey games as well as basketball games, and that's another story in itself. We started playing hockey and basketball regularly, and the band had this look about it. And in 1973, the hockey team won a national championship, and we took 2 busloads of people to the Boston Gardens, thanks to Elroy Hirsch financing it, and we just overwhelmed everything that happened. We won the national championship, and it was the start of a legacy of band activities that, again, played over into what the football team was doing. So we started helping each other at that point. Some of the highlights, we won the hockey championship 6 times during my tenure at Wisconsin, and each one of them was very memorable. I think the last one was in Milwaukee, and that made it especially memorable for me. It was also at hockey that the idea of the You Said It All started to get itself established. You Said It All was a song that we had played at a number of basketball and hockey games just as a number. Actually, I was using it to more or less have the band react to when the crowd would ask for a polka. We had a group of students who set up in, I think it was section GG at the Dane County Coliseum, and they would set up there, and when the band would stop playing, they would start chanting, "We want a polka, we want a polka." And the only thing that I had at that time that resembled a polka was this song, which was a beer commercial called You Said It All. And so I played it. I told the drummers to play sort of a little different part than what the music had called for. And I said, make it sound like a polka. We did, and the people clapped, and they thought that was wonderful. Next game, we want a polka, we want a polka. And we played the same tune. Well, about the 3rd or 4th game, I noticed that the crowd, particularly that group of students up in section GG, and if you're watching today, you know who you are. But those people up there kept saying, instead of saying, "We want a polka," when they got to that spot in You Said It All, where you name the name of the product, when you say, "You've said it all," they were putting the name of the product in. So I decided that's not good. It's sort of gives the impression we're promoting people to have an alcoholic beverage. And so I said to the band, when we get to that spot in the music, you jump up, turn around, and holler when you say Wisconsin. You've said it all. Had the same number of syllables, so it worked. It didn't work so far as the crowd was concerned for a while, because it became sort of a battle back and forth for a few games. But that hockey tournament in 1973, it turned the corner. We started playing that song every place you could imagine in the city of Boston, and some you couldn't imagine. And it became established as a Wisconsin song, and it became one of those tunes that became our trademark. And we play it at commencement, we play it at basketball, we play it at hockey, we play it almost any time we can, because it's that immediate, everybody starts clapping, and it's a happy sound, it's a happy tune. So that became a part of the tradition that we were going. Basketball started to get better, and we started getting more and more interest in what we were doing. I think one of the things that piqued the interest was Coach John Paulus, who was a very good friend at the time and really helpful in getting the band at basketball games and excited. I remember there was a very famous game where we were getting very bad referees from the three officials that night. And at one point, I had the band start playing Three Blind Mice because it seemed apropos to what the referees were doing. And I thought for sure I was either going to get a technical foul or get a reprimand, but the band kept playing it. And John Paulus, who was our coach at the time, stood up and started conducting, which just added fuel to the fire. But it made, again, the band feel very important about what was going on at that particular time. We've gone on, we've had great moments. People always ask me, and I've almost shied away from answering it because it becomes such a common question, is what was your greatest moment? Well, the greatest moment in my history with the band was that Rose Bowl in 1993-94. That was, to me, was everything I had hoped for. I mean, I had waited 25 years to get to my first Rose Bowl. And when it finally arrived, it was everything that I had hoped for it to be. And if you were there, you can remember there was an excitement around this state that has never been equaled or surpassed. And so that was the great moments. But bowl games became almost commonplace. I don't think they ever seemed commonplace, but we had, I think we've gone to 26, well, with the most recent Rose Bowl, which the last edition of the band got to do, that would be 27, but I think we had 26 bowl appearances in my time. First one was a Garden State Bowl in New Jersey, which was fun because the band got to go to New York. And then that followed it with the first Wisconsin win we had ever been present at in a bowl game, and that was the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana. Coach Alvarez used to say there's no such thing as a bad bowl game. And I think that's true up to a point. I mean, we've been to many different bowls and they've all been very exciting, and the people who hosted us were very cordial. It was great. But Coach Alvarez wasn't at the Independence Bowl in 1981 because it was not a pleasant day for us. It rained the entire trip, and it was cold and rainy, but Wisconsin won that ball game, and that made it a very special time again for the band members that were there.
Mike, thanks so much for all of the fantastic stories and memories. And boy, our Facebook event is blowing up. You've had hundreds of people coming in and off talking about their experiences. And everybody, I'm Fran Paleo-Moyer, Badger Talks producer. Thanks so much for tuning in today and hearing some of these great stories. We have a few questions that have been posted, which I think you'll get a kick out of. Dean Buzalaki is wondering, Mike, why is the tuba section the best section?
Because, well, they're not, but they think they are. And that's part of the charm. See, that's they've fooled themselves all these years into thinking that they're the best. And I just let them go because they don't get in the way of the rest of us.
That's awesome. And please feel free to post your questions in the chat if you want to continue to engage. So Sarah Marty had asked people to think back to their favorite Mike Leckrone slogan or saying. And Tammy Copeland says, "Who the heck likes corn?" Let's see, another one. "You can't catch cold from exposure." Another one is, this one, I wasn't a member of the band, so "Root hog or die."
Root hog or die. That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Scott Hurley, let's see. "Stay off the blank internet" doesn't seem appropriate here, so I'll go with "You can stand anything if you know when it's going to end."
Yeah. Most of those sayings are ones that I got from my grandfather, who was a very wise man, considering he only had about a 7th or 8th grade education, but he was very wise and he had a lot of great sayings. And By the way, I heard you mention Sarah Marty's name, who was we didn't get to it today, but was very important cog in that whole machinery that made the concert, which was my last really formal appearance with the band. It was that whole concert thing that evolved into something that was extraordinary, and I had so many great people helping it. And I think probably my favorite saying to come out of all that was one that I've heard bandied about a lot. I used to say, eat a rock, which means be as tough as you possibly can. And I could say it even today to a group of students who are laboring to do something. And if they were in the band, they understand what it means. It means get down to work and get busy.
Yeah, I was remiss in not mentioning that one because that one was put out there a few times, Mike, just so you know, they didn't forget it.
I don't see how they could have. I didn't give them a chance.
So Michael, well, we have so many comments out here. I'm sorry, Facebook's being a little glitchy today, so sorry for all the freezing. But Jeffrey Brighton, sorry. Mike, are you still arranging music?
Well, yes, I really am. In fact, I just finished two pieces, one for the Economowoc High School Band and one for the New Horizons adult band, which I've been working on. And I've got a couple other things that I don't write as much for marching band as I did, obviously, when I was at Wisconsin, but I still do a lot of writing. And in fact, just when we had this current pandemic, I had a couple of people who had asked me to write for their marching bands, but of course it didn't come to any fruition because of the situation we're in.
Well, that's fascinating. Michael Horner Ibler is asking, Mike, how are you staying busy during COVID?
Well, I just sort of mentioned it. I've been doing a lot of I did a bit of writing. I had the opportunity to do things like this. This is keeping me busy. I've done a class in adult education on the big bands. I'm going to do a big band's Christmas show on the 16th of December. So
and we did post a link in the chat to sign up for Mike's big band class if you're interested.
So I've been doing that. There've been I've had a number of opportunities to go on Zoom with high school and even adult bands, again, just to talk about music, so that's kept me busy. And I mean, I don't want to make it a plug, but it's going to turn out to be one. I'm in the process of putting together a autobiography, or however you want to look at it, of the days that I've had with the band and my career from even before the band. So that's been something that's been very involved. And then all else fails, I got a lot of records I can listen to. So I've kept pretty busy.
Well, that's really exciting. We'll all look forward to hearing about your autobiography coming out. That's really, really good news.
Well, we hope it's soon.
We have just a couple of comments. I can't get to everybody's comment here, but I just wanted to, Skylar Wixom says, I just want to say thank you, Mike, for everything you've done and continue to do. I actually am going to school to do just like you. Thank you for being an inspiration.
Set your standards higher, please.
Let's see. Anne Marie, thank you for being so tough and kind all these years. Very thankful my son was able to play under your direction for 2 years. Always a pleasure to see you. So many great comments out here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And Mike Leckrone, thanks so much again for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Believe me, it's my pleasure. Who doesn't like to talk about themselves?
On Wisconsin.
See you real soon and On Wisconsin.
Thank you. Tune in next week, everybody. Mark Hairston, Assistant Professor of Acting and Directing at UW-Madison, is going to be joining us. And he, a native of Washington, D.C., Mark has an MFA in Directing from Columbia University School of Arts, a BFA in Acting from Rutgers, and most recently has been doing a lot of work with the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. Mark is going to be reflecting on his practice of theater as a profession and as a means of expression and as a unique path towards self-mastery. So please tune in. That'll be our last Badger Talks Live of 2020. Then tune in again, January 26th, we will resume Badger Talks Live weekly. Tune into the website, badgertalks.wisc.edu for future programming. We'll put it out there probably in early January, so stay tuned. There's you seeing messaging about donations. We are taking donations on this special Badger Talks Live just to support future programming. So if we're able to, we sure do appreciate the support. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Take care.